Hey, Doug Wilkes with Southern Visions Real Estate. I work in sales and development for the company. I'm here with Thomas Causey, geologist with Stantec, which is a global infrastructure consulting firm. Also here with Luke Godbold, Director of Development Services for the City of Cayce, as well as Gregory Wilkins, Sales and Development and co-owner of Southern Visions. And today, the main purpose is to talk about the great things happening in the City of Cayce, the benefits of redeveloping and investing in Cayce, and some of the programs that they've implemented. And with that, we'll turn it over to Luke and see what they've got going on in the City of Cayce.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this today. I guess we'll go ahead and start off with what we're working on here with our Brownfields Grant we received from the EPA. We have our consultant here, Stantec, to help me better explain this program. But just for a general overview, we have monies available for phase 1, phase 2 ESAs, and cleanup planning, as well as other services that Thomas will elaborate here on shortly. But our target area, our cleanup or planning area that we have a grant for is primarily here in the Frink Street, Foreman Street, State Street, Lexington Avenue, etc. area that we're really trying to cater this plan towards and really strategize on the future of this area as far as property cleanup planning goes, as far as redevelopment, revitalization goes, infrastructural improvements, etc. Well, I also want to get into the City of Cayce's facade grant today. I want to touch on our TIF district and just the overall vision of what we're working on here right now with our UDO rewrite. But back to the brownfields, I'll go ahead and turn over to Thomas here to further explain this program.
Thanks, Luke. A brownfields property is any property that is underutilized, vacant, or contaminated, and most importantly, perceived to be contaminated. So a brownfields property, in our perspective, is really any property. We could make a good argument for this perceived contamination. And the classic examples are the abandoned strip malls, the gas stations, the old dry cleaners, the abandoned textile mills, all that have this eyesore on the streets, eyesore in the community. They're dilapidated, they're vacant, they have vagrants in them, oftentimes they're vandalized, and these are the types of properties that we really try to hone in on for these brownfields grants. Here in Cayce, we're seeing a lot more of these underutilized retail facilities. And a couple of old gas stations and a few industrial sites. We have our target area here along Frink Street and State Street, where the bulk of this old commercial industrial activity kind of occurred. And you'll see adjacent to a lot of these properties are residential homes. So although this is an economic arm that I'll kind of talk about that mechanism, but it's really about environmental safety for both the community and property owners. So how the system or how the program works is, like Luke said, that Cayce had received a couple $100,000 for assessment activities within city limits. And the first step is the due diligence process called a phase 1 environmental site assessment, where we actually go to these properties, we interview the owners, we take photos of the property, do a bunch of desktop reviews, look at old maps, previous uses, and try to ascertain whether environmental contamination is present on site. This could be anything from heavy metals in the soil to a release of an underground storage tank to asbestos materials to lead-based paint to indoor air quality concerns. And that is typically the first step for any commercial property transaction. That due diligence process is really vital in both determining the property's value and its potential imminent threat to site users. In that phase 1, again, we'll explain what it's called a recognized environmental condition. And those RECs, as we call them, RECs, are all those things outlined that we believe could be potentially contaminating the property. Okay. If we do find those RECs, then we go to what's called a phase 2, which is the assessment side of things, which is where we actually go to the properties, we take the samples, and we try to gather all the data we can to verify if it's there or if it isn't. And if it isn't, you got a clean site, no issues. But if it is there, we can go to phase 3, which is more of a cleanup planning initiative. This again is an assessment grant, so we cannot use the money to actually clean up most of these issues, but we can use the money to tell you how to do so. So it's a really helpful tool for the whole community.
So Gregory, as a developer, you've done almost 200 sites. How would this play in when you're working with a landowner that say it's time for them to sell their properties? How does this help them?
Right. So from what I'm hearing, there's actually grants for property owners within the city of Cayce to do a phase 1 or phase 2 for free. So let's say I owned a piece of property. Let's say it was an old gas station. I didn't want to spend the $3,000, $4,000 for the phase 1. Let's say the $10,000 to $50,000 for the phase 2. I could actually receive a grant in the city of Cayce to determine what contamination is on my site. And then from there, I could figure out if it's either bad or good and then determine how to remediate that site. So if I was a property owner in Cayce and knew that this existed, I think it would be integral to determining the future of that property and essentially determining whether or not it could be redeveloped or reconfigured. So this is an enormous opportunity, I think, for people within Cayce to take part of. Oftentimes, as a developer, we spend immense amount of what we call soft cost to start a development. And if I could get that off my, my balance sheet and say, look, well, this is free, I can get this information for free, I think it's something I would jump into. I do not think these grant funds are going to last forever, so I do think it's something that if you want to jump into, you should do now. And again, there's no liability on your side. If you're not going to redevelop, at least knowing what contamination issues there are on your property is the first step to planning for the future, whether that's you or your grandkids or your grandkids' grandkids. It's good to at least know, because you cannot do any development without knowing what your environmental concerns are.
So you could shorten your whole due diligence period.
Yeah.
The developer comes in with eyes wide open. They're not running into issues through it. And then, somebody might be trying to retrade you on the deal.
Right.
And Luke, is there a time frame on the money?
As far as how much longer we have it?
Yeah.
We have it until the end of September here in 2026, before our current grant expires. We're hopeful that we will receive an extension from the EPA, depending on how we utilize the program here within the next few months. We're optimistic that we'll be in a good position to receive an extension, but that is largely contingent upon, like I said, how we utilize it, and we want people to utilize it because it's just a great tool, and we certainly don't want to lose it. So pretty much, in short, you use it or you lose it, and that's where we're at right now.
Say we had a family that they inherited a former gas station. They're looking to disposition it. They're working with us. We're working with you. They start the program. Can you walk us through? All right, we do the phase 1. Okay, there was a gas station here. Now we do phase 2, and that will identify the cleanup process, or what will that do?
Well, let me talk about two things with that. One, the timing element is pretty critical here. A phase 1 typically takes 3 to 4 weeks, we ask for, and that's a standard no matter how big or small the property is. After that's completed, we would then submit the site for eligibility through the EPA, which is sort of a check the box list of things like, are you the responsible party for that contamination? We check boxes on historic ownership. We check boxes on, just general property information that the EPA is aware of. And then we see that determination letter, assuming they say yes, and then we begin the process of creating what's called it's basically a sampling plan that the EPA has to approve on the back end, which can take a month or longer to complete. It's a very exhaustive QA/QC document that we have to do through this program for the EPA to review, acknowledge, and sign off on before fieldwork can begin. Typically, from phase 1 to phase 2 completion, it's about 3 or so months. So if our grant deadline is at the end of September, ideally we would have properties within the program by June-ish is really like the end date for if you wanted to go through this entire cycle. But like I said, we submit the analysis plan, they approve it, we do the phase 2 work, we get the data, and we compare it to applicable screening levels, both state and federal, that can identify problem areas, if any. So the gas station is a perfect example. It's a classic example for brownfields. we would be able to ascertain whether groundwater was contaminated, how far it is it off the property, and then we could further identify steps to clean that up if need be. However, we are advising, and many EPA officials are as well, instead of cleanup, a lot of the time what we're doing is mitigating through engineering controls and administrative controls. So things like groundwater use prohibitions, administering an engineering control like a parking lot, so that way people can't actually dig up contaminated dirt, or someone can't, play with it or eat it like a small child. That greatly reduces the costs and greatly reduces your liability for any kind of on-site, issues you have.
And is that handled after the phase 2 or part of it, or that's the planning process?
That is after the phase 2, once we have all that data in. And sometimes we have a good idea in the phase 1 portion, but most of the time we want to get an accurate, up-to-date, and current data set to actually make an informed decision.
Now, as the landowner, if I'm the one that owned the gas station, and now I'm the one that's seen as the responsible party, what happens to me?
Well, you're still okay in this program because you did not own the property while the tanks were operating. Okay. However, you are legally responsible for that contamination, but you weren't the one who caused it. So you would be eligible in this grant cycle. However, what you would probably have to do is go through a different statewide brownfields program if you wanted any sort of liability protection. This grant does not offer that to landowners. It is simply a mechanism for assessment and for economic development, but it does not provide any sort of liability protection from on-site contamination.
Okay, and I think the buyer can then enter into a state program?
Yes, it's called, in South Carolina, the Voluntary Cleanup Program. We'll call it the State Brownfields Program because it's kind of the same thing. It offers regulatory and third-party liability protections. There is a non-responsible party contract and a responsible party contract, and the differences are very, very minor. But with the responsible party, it's generally required to have a more exhaustive assessment phase and a more exhaustive cleanup phase, while the non-responsible party is more geared towards how quickly and easily can we redevelop the site. So sometimes the regulatory bodies are a little more lenient on how much you have to assess up front and how much you need to actually clean up. But you have to prove through ownership and operational history, rather you actually caused these issues. Did you build the gas station and operate it for 30 years, or did you just buy it, or did you inherit it from a grandfather? All that stuff kind of comes into play when you set up those contracts. In South Carolina, that program is free, which is really great because a lot of other states in the U.S. don't have a free program, and it's much more difficult to get in. There's also very lucrative tax incentives. I don't know the specific payout structure, but I believe it's lucrative enough that people go way out of their way to make sure they can enter their property into it.
Well, Thomas, those are all great points, and I just want to get it back to the landowner. Gregory, as a developer and a real estate brokerage owner, how does that benefit the landowner in a transaction to get their property market ready?
Right. I think if you have a site that you assume is contaminated, or you might have knowledge of that, I think having this further granular knowledge is incredibly helpful to sort of set a plan, especially if a phase 1 and phase 2 can be paid for via a grant. It gives you a roadmap of what to do with whatever next step. And of course, the City of Cayce is trying to revitalize the Frink Street, State Street area into less industrial, into more mixed use. And there's a ton of tools that Luke can talk about that they've implemented. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you can get free money and learn more about your property, I think it's an incredibly obvious decision for me as a developer or real estate broker. So I think it's something that everyone should take advantage of.
Yeah, Luke, so the overall vision is to take Frink Street from, what it currently is an industrial avenue to a more retail-centric community mixed-use living space. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it headed right now is we currently have a zoning ordinance and land development regulations, and we're moving to a unified development ordinance format, which combines our zoning ordinance and land development regulations. And a part of this, if you will, rewrite process, we've really evaluated the future land use and zoning of these types of areas in Cayce. State Street and Frink Street being towards the top of our list of what's going to happen here in the future. And kind of where we're at right now is, Frink Street has historically been largely light industrial, in some cases heavy industrial. And we're trying to kind of see an extension of State Street to Frink Street. We want to see that mixed use downtown, walkable, live work space that creates the downtown feel. And we're catering and accommodating that vision through our UDO with zoning tools. We're really getting more specific on what uses are permitted on Frink Street in particular. The city is investing in a lot of capital projects in the area right now. Frink Street is currently having sidewalks installed as a city effort, and towards Foreman Street, coming from Frink Street, we're currently working on our Rails to Trails project, which is a multi-use trail as a part of our trail network. That's really going to create that more walkable feel in connection to the Frink Street sidewalk project. So as we're accommodating this walkable vision, we want to accommodate the uses that support walkability in this area. So, as we implement this UDO, you're going to see some things be done different in the future. And we're, just to take it even a step further, utilizing this Brownfields program and utilizing other city incentives such as our facade grant are going to make this change of use and this future vision more feasible from a financial standpoint for developers. And if you don't mind, I guess I'll go ahead and kind of talk about what we're doing with our facade grant, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, please do.
So the City of Cayce currently has a city-administered facade grant that is currently a $5,000 maximum award. It's a 50-50 reimbursement program. So just the typical way these things work is a developer or a property owner or someone who has interest in revitalizing a property's facade will apply using a City of Cayce facade grant application for this grant, and they'll state what they intend to do, how much they're requesting, etc. It will go to our facade grant review committee to be reviewed, and we will then make a decision on whether or not we want to award the grant. From there, whoever is performing the project will they will pay up front to perform the work, and then upon inspection by city staff to make sure the work was completed to their application standards that were approved, we will reimburse them the approved amount. Like I said, currently that grant is a $5,000 award. And currently for this fiscal year, which ends June 30th, we are fully exhausted. We completely used up our $25,000 budget for this fiscal year, which is great because we have not seen a heavy utilization of it in years past, and that's starting to change. We're seeing people utilize this grant, and we want to make sure that people know about it and know to apply for it moving into the next fiscal year. I must note that this program is made available as funds are made available. So it is contingent upon funds being made available and approved during this new fiscal year's budgetary cycle, which I'm personally I feel comfortable saying I would say it's going to be approved for next year, seeing as it's been approved for several years now. But that is a note I had to add. If anyone has any questions about this program, please feel free to contact me or visit our economic development website, choosecaycesc, as in South Carolina.com. And you can read more about not only the facade grant, but the Brownfields grant as well, and other programs such as our TIF district. And so I guess I'll go ahead and get into our TIF district now. The City of Cayce has a TIF district implemented primarily in the Knox Abbott area, extends a little bit into State Street. But just for a bird's eye view of what this program is it's creative way to allocate tax dollars to make sure that the monies that we collect from property taxes, that are collected from property taxes in a particular area, go back into that area for infrastructural improvements. There's other eligible improvements that I won't get too much into today, but you can read more about that on choosecasesc.com as well. I just felt that it would be important to share that as well. But there's a lot of great tools we have to help developers, property owners, et cetera, to make projects happen here. And I think we have a great vision coming down the pipeline here in the city of Cayce at large.
Yeah, I really think the overall vision of Cayce and the things that you've put in place, number one, the federal government identified it as an opportunity zone. That will be in place for this census tract, should be through the end of the year. Check with your CPA. Then you've got the Brownfields, which is going to save a lot of money. The facade grants, the TIF districts, where you're allocating tax dollars towards the actual area around your property to help improve that area. And then the rezoning for the future. To me, Cayce is a great place to invest and, either start a business or grow your business or expand it.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.